The Jazz, I think, shocked a lot of people yesterday by signing Ersan Ilyasova. 6'9", not a 7-footer. Former Milwaukee Buck. What? I wanted a 7-footer. They grow on trees, right? 6'9" sharpshooter. Little surprised he was still on the market. He's one of those guys until you hear that the Jazz signed him, you're like, who? You don't think about Ersan Ilyasova. But the good news, if you're a Jazz fan, is he's absolutely the perfect fit. And I was a little surprised yesterday on social media, because we all know that social media is the beginning and the end and the policy setter in this country.
Right.
I was a little surprised on the old tweet machine that there was not more positive response to Ersan Ilyasova signing with the Jazz, because what do we know about him? 6'9", wing shooter, pretty good defender, better defender than Bogey, Mr. Bogdanovic. Better defender than Bogdanovic.
Yep.
Right? Plays bigger than Bogdanovic. And, I mean, it's not like he's going to be able to guard LeBron James, but he can certainly play with a forearm in the middle of your back on the block. He does a lot of things, Jake, that this Jazz team needs and is lacking off the bench right now. I think this is a home run.
Yeah, I think to me what this addresses is the situation that we had at the end of the Philly game, where you've got Tobias Harris just backing down Bogdanovic, 3-4 possessions in a row. And if you can take Bogdanovic out of that situation and replace it with Ilyasova in terms of defense, I think you're in a bit of a better spot. I think, just like you were just saying, Ilyasova is a bit of a bigger body. He's more capable down there. He essentially just gives you another layer of defense, and I like it. And yes, he does shoot the ball at a pretty good rate, and I think that's really important for this team, because that's the identity of the Utah Jazz. You're a 3-and-D team. That's who you've been. That's who you're going to be, and that's how you're going to try and win a championship. And so I like the signing. I think it is definitely an under-the-radar kind of signing. It is a savvy signing, and these are the kind of things that the Jazz need to be doing. Would I have loved it if they got aggressive and tried to go get Bradley Beal? Sure. That would be amazing. But clearly, that the Beal market has kind of cooled off a little bit, I feel like. And now we're at a point where teams are trying to kind of solidify their rosters. And so I like this signing a lot. I think he fills a definite need, and I'm excited to see what he can kind of bring to this team once he's fully in the rotation.
Yeah, I have very little doubt that he fits right in. I think he goes right into the rotation fully. I think when you look at what happened in the Clipper game, I think when you look at what happened in the Sixer game, it was very much what you said. It was Tobias Harris backing guys down on the block, and they just didn't have an answer for that. And I think even if you project out a little further and you look at what Blake Griffin brings to the Brooklyn Nets, he brings a real physical presence. And he's, as you pointed out last week, I mean, Blake Griffin's probably going to play a lot on the block in the 5 or the 4. For the Pistons, or when he was with the Pistons, he didn't do that. Now that he's a net, they're going to make him do that, and I think it's a better fit for him. I think he was miscast in Detroit, but the thing that ties this back to the Jazz is that if you get to the NBA Finals and you run into a team like the Brooklyn Nets, you're going to have somebody who can play offensively with their back to the basket, who can defend guys like Blake Griffin down there. That's why I still maintain that Andre Drummond is the best signing that you're going to have, or the best guy that you could go and get, because you need that physical presence down there if you're the Jazz. I don't think Ilyasova does that. But what he does do is he brings shooting. And on this roster where Quin Snyder has repeatedly said we will never be able to shoot enough threes, he shoots more threes. And he's able to finish in traffic. He's able to finish guys with them at his feet, getting fouled. Like, he is the guy that fits in perfectly. He's a Euro player. He fits in culturally. There's no downside to this signing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a great fit. And I think, does Ersan Ilyasova make them, an instant championship contender? Well, no, because frankly, they were already a championship contender. I mean, that's not what this signing's about. I think literally what this signing is about is just being able to again, give yourself as a team more flexibility in the way that you play teams defensively. So, if you're playing a team that's a 3-and-D kind of team, yeah, you're probably not going to see Ersan as much in a game. Whereas if you're playing a physical team like the Clippers, the Sixers, any of these teams that have guys on the block or down low that can really get after you, yeah, you're going to see him more. And I think that's the beauty of this signing. It's not like you signed a star who's got to get, 35 minutes a night. This is a guy who you can plug and play with when you need to. He's going to play. I think if you're George Niang, this is a guy you're going to compete with a little bit. They can both shoot. They can both play decent defense. The difference is that Ilyasova is a bigger guy, so he can play defense in more ways, which is crucial for this team. So I like the signing. Does it catapult them in any way? No, I don't think so. But what it does do is it covers them on defense in another way, which is important.
I don't know that I agree with you on that. I think this is a big upgrade because I have been a pretty vocal critic on this show if you've listened about our Jazz content. I'm not a fan of Bogdanovic. I like that he makes a lot of threes. I think he doesn't finish at the rack the way I'd like him to. And I think defensively he can be a turnstile late in games, and we've seen that pretty regularly. I also think there's an important conversation to be had about what does this do to Rudy Gobert. Because, again, not to keep pointing back to the open wound, but I look at the Sixer loss and I look at the Clipper loss, and I say to myself, those teams both went small, and then whenever Rudy was in the game against Embiid had his way. And I think there's messaging that's been heard loud and clear with the Jazz brass, and that is that we have to be able to play small lineups and still be able to defend at a high level. I think Ilyasova does that. I think when you look at that Clipper game, Ilyasova will be in the game as a 4-5 because I don't believe in assigning numbers to guys necessarily.
Right.
But you're going to have a hard time convincing me that Rudy Gobert is the guy who's not going to lose minutes. Like, he is going to lose minutes to Ilyasova.
Yeah, well, like, if you look at the Clipper game, the matchup that we're referencing in that game with that roster is the Morris versus Bogdanovic matchup. Morris versus Joe Ingles. There were several times where Morris was able to have his way on the block. Now I'm not saying that Morris is somehow as dominant as Tobias Harris, but what I am saying is that Morris on any given night can get after you. He can give you 15. He can give you 17 points if he's having a good night. And I think that the Jazz are forecasting forward saying, okay, we believe, and I think most of us believe that the Jazz are going to be, if not the number 1 seed, the number 2 seed. And I would say that they're probably going to win the West this year. So if that happens, what that means is, yes, you're going to have home court advantage, but you're going to get some interesting matchups. You should win in the first round. You should win in the second round. It's when you get to the Western Conference Finals, then you start saying, okay, now these matchups really matter. Now this Ilyasova signing is going to come in, and we're going to be able to do what we need to do based on what the offense is trying to do to our defense. And yes, when we go down on the other end while Ilyasova is in the game, yeah, he's going to knock down the three, which is huge. I think you couldn't ask for much better on this team. Like, if you signed a guy who couldn't shoot the three-point shot and was only a defensive guy, now you just have another issue. But because this guy can shoot it at a good enough rate, this is a good signing, and I think they couldn't have done much better.
I'm not convinced that this team can win without Rudy Gobert on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not convinced of that. I'm not convinced that the Jazz can play at an elite level without Rudy in the lineup. I want to see that because they need to. I think one of the things that really strikes me when Rudy's not in there, when they go with that Derek Favors lineup, they're just not good enough. Mm-hmm. With all due respect to Derek, Derek should be a 15-minute-a-night role player, not somebody who is your first big man off the bench. So I think that's definitely something to watch. The other thing that's interesting is this gives you more Joe Ingles flexibility because I also think Joe has to be in the game late. I think he's a really important part of that lineup, and I think you're better off with a Donovan Mitchell, a Bogdanovic, a Royce O'Neal, a Joe Ingles, and an Ersan.
Mm-hmm.
That 5 at the end of a game is not going to kill you.
No, and it gives you options offensively. That's the problem with Rudy offensively late in games is he limits you. So that's why you don't see him a lot late in games unless they're ahead. If they're ahead by 10, Rudy's going to be in the game because you want to play defense at that point. If they're down by 2, Rudy's not going to be in the game late in the game because you got to have Donovan, Jordan Clarkson. You got to have Royce O'Neal out there for defense. You got to have Bogey and Ingles out there as well for shooting. So it's going to be, to your point, it's going to be a mix of those guys. And I think the mission with Ersan is to figure out, okay, based on the situation, how can we use this guy? How can this guy benefit us? Okay, we're playing the Clippers. Okay, this is how we're going to use them. We're playing the Sixers. This is how we're going to use them. We're playing this crappy-ass team. We're probably not going to use them as much. So it just depends.
Yeah, and by the way, I still maintain that right now today, the Jazz are still the best team in the NBA. I think I want to see more out of the Clippers.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, because frankly, I hate the Clippers. But I find myself wanting better basketball out of that club.
Well, they have the talent. They should be providing better basketball. The difference is that they're soft. They're not a mentally tough team. And
Yeah, they are.
so, and yes, the Jazz did lose to them, but my point here is that in a 7-game series, I think it'd be a really tight series, but I also think that the mental edge would go to the Jazz, Now, having said that, they just, were crying and complaining heading into the All-Star break. So we'll see if that gets fixed or not.
I wonder if there's any hangover from that.
Well,
I mean, I highly doubt there is. There's a burnout factor, but you've been off now. Obviously Rudy, Conley, and Donovan were at the All-Star game. Quin was at the All-Star game. But, again, I look at the way this team is built, and I think they'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have, really 4 full days off before you play. Full NBA schedule returns tomorrow. You got a couple of throwing games tonight, including the Spurs and Mavericks. But I wonder, like Mike Conley's coming off of what was a really good All-Star performance for him.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the 3-point contest, scores in the game isn't really a factor. I'm curious, what does Mike Conley bring in the second half? Because I don't think you can count on him. I think he's just too injury prone. The best indicator of future action is past behavior, and he is constantly injured.
Yep.
And I think it's one of those things where you won't be able to count on him. But when we look across the Western Conference, especially at the top, I think that you have to count on the secondary guys. Can you count on Jordan Clarkson to be that, 40% three-point shooter that brings you 20 points a night and is a gas can off the bench?
In big games, you
I
can't
don't
say
know.
you can because he hasn't shown up in big games. In games that are comfortable, that are not of consequence, he shows up. And again, you wouldn't know this unless you watch most of their games. But he didn't show up in the Clipper game. He definitely didn't show up in the Philly game. So I think Jordan Clarkson definitely still has something to prove.
But
here.
is Jordan Clarkson getting that opportunity late in the game? Because I think in those 2 games that you mentioned, he was not getting regular late game minutes. I mean, he was a rotational player.
But he's not getting those because he didn't do anything early in the game when he got his minutes. So if you're not going to do anything early in the game when you have your minutes, why would I go to you late in the game? That's the problem.
I don't know that I agree with that. I think when I look at those games and I look at Jordan's role in those games, he certainly scored the basketball. But I think there is a trust issue with Jordan late in games because he doesn't pass the ball.
Well, that could be. Yeah.
He is a very much a me first guy, and as a 6-man off the bench that is counted on to score, that's your role. But you're not Lou Williams. You don't play a well enough rounded game late in games where you have to understand that Donovan Mitchell has to touch the ball.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me that in the Clipper game, he doesn't touch the ball on those late possessions. Like, it's absolutely stunning to me.
Yeah.
That'd be like, Cantavius Caldwell-Pope taking the ball from LeBron.
That'd be like J.R. Smith not giving the ball to LeBron.
I mean, it really is a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
So, it'll be interesting. I think we're going to see more from the Clippers. I still think we have an incredibly busy trade deadline coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have a really active free agency period that's coming. It is becoming very clear that people believe the Nets are the best team in the NBA. It took about 32 seconds for Blake Griffin to sign with the Nets as soon as that was available. And I again, like, that's why this Miles Leonard situation is so fascinating. Miles Leonard was a Utah Jazz. I mean, it was done. And then he came out and dropped an anti-Semitic slur on Twitch while playing Call of Duty, and all of a sudden, Miles Leonard isn't a Utah Jazz man. Mm-hmm. And what I think is so interesting is the Jazz are clearly trying to upgrade their bigs.
Right.
I think you're starting to figure out that, A, I'm fucking brilliant. Like, I know a thing or 28 about the NBA.
Uh-huh.
And on top of my good looks, I think when you talk about nothing,
No.
I think when you talk about guys like George Niang,
Yeah.
George is not good enough. on a championship caliber team.
Agreed.
I think when you talk about Rudy Gobert, I think the Jazz realize he's a liability late in games.
Yeah.
I think you look at their build right now, they need a big who can play the perimeter. And I think they know they don't have that.
Yeah.
And I think they still don't have that.
No, they don't. And it's really frustrating that Leonard would go out and say something like this because he's, it is awful. It is unacceptable. I felt like his apology was half-hearted at best. I feel like trying to justify it by saying you didn't know the history of that word is one of the dumbest things that I've ever heard an athlete say. Sure, I don't have a chronological breakdown of the history of that word, but I know that I shouldn't be saying it, and I think everybody knows that you shouldn't be saying it, especially if you're an athlete. By the way, how many guys are going to get in trouble on live streams? How many guys are going to play Call of Duty or be in a sim or whatever on a live stream that's public and say these things?
The problem is that, I look at Kyle Larson, the NASCAR driver, and for those of you who don't know this story, he was in the e-racing league, which is, if in the off season they get on computer simulators and they have a NASCAR season on simulators, and everybody's in different locations. It's pretty cool. Kyle Larson, a year ago in the off season, was in a simulator and dropped an N-bomb on somebody, and he immediately gets cut from Chip Ganassi Racing. Takes a year off, and then what happens? He never gets his job back. Oh, wait, that's right. He did get his job back. He signed with Hendrick Motorsports, arguably the top team in NASCAR, and they gave him the number 5, which is a historic number. They put him in a situation where he's got a top crew, and now he's winning races again.
Yeah.
He did, N-bomb and Schmenbomb, it's fine.
It's almost like it doesn't even matter, and that's the thing.
It's incredible.
I wish that guys would understand the damage that they do by saying these things. I mean, you are not, if you're Leonard or if you're Kyle Larson or if you're any of these guys, you can't just go and say whatever you want, man. I mean, using racial slurs for anybody, athlete or not, is an issue, but B, as an athlete, you have a higher responsibility, and these guys don't get that.
Well, because who holds them accountable?
Yeah, I guess nobody. I guess the question really is, like Kyle Larson, at what point do we say he paid his dues, or at what point do we say he should never race again? I don't. That's a really tough conversation, in my opinion. How do we say to somebody, hey, you made this mistake, you said something, you were suspended for a year, and we're still going to hold it against you? I don't know how, because if I made that mistake, I would definitely understand why people would be upset, but I'd also want a second opportunity to right the ship, But at the same time, I'm also not driving for Hendrick Motorsport in the number 5 and competing to win a Cup Series championship.
Myers Leonard is going to learn a very difficult lesson here.
Yeah.
And I think that lesson is that your career was not really, he's not a star.
Right.
He's a role player. As a role player, you can't drop anti-Semitic slurs on Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Kyle Larson, I guess, is a star in NASCAR again. So he can say what he wants, apparently. But I think Myers Leonard is in a lot of trouble here. I don't know, because, let's be honest about it. Myers Leonard was going to be a Jazz man. They were going to. They had a deal.
And he would have use on this team for sure.
Yes, he would. Yes, he would. But that's all out the window now. And I don't know what you do here. That's my biggest thing is I don't know. And just looking at some of the reaction, the Myers Leonard saga, why do I want to keep saying Myers Leonard? Myers Leonard, that attempt speaks volumes about where the Jazz view their championship hopes. That tells you they think they're really close. Mm-hmm. Because they weren't going out and trying to get, the best center, or they weren't trying to get, the best power forward.
Right.
They were trying to get a role player who can fill a need.
They feel like they've got a good core, but they have a couple of small issues that they need to kind of fill in. And they felt like Myers Leonard would fill that gap for them. And I have to tell you, I kind of agree, because Leonard is one of those guys. He's kind of like, I would say that he's kind of akin to like a Steven Adams almost. He's a big, strong guy. I don't
shoot.
He can shoot.
Myers Leonard can shoot.
But didn't he play for Portland?
Yes.
Didn't he do good things for Portland? Right.
Yes.
So he can shoot. He sets good screens. He's a physical player. He's a great alternative to Rudy when Rudy isn't in the game. So like I think that on one hand they may be saying, hey, we understand that Derek Favors isn't good enough, but on the other hand they're also saying, hey, well, maybe it's not a Derek Favors issue, maybe it's a matchup issue, and that teams are exploiting Rudy, which is exactly what they're doing. Whether it's the Clippers, the Sixers, any of these teams that have been in tough battles with the Jazz.
Yeah, I think the Heat are going to waive him because that'll allow them to keep their disabled player exception.
Yeah.
They owe him $4 million, but in the parlance of our NBA times, that's not a whole lot.
Yeah.
I think they wind up dropping him. I don't know. Does somebody sign him?
You got to have balls to sign somebody like that right now.
He's a guy that is shooting 43% from three right now.
Pretty good.
He was in position to compete for a championship this year.
But this is the age-old question then. So, great, he's got the numbers, everything looks great, seems like a great guy, and then he goes and drops a racial slur. So if you're a team and you're looking at this, the Jazz definitely are not going to sign this guy now. There's no question. That's over with.
I'd be surprised.
But if you're looking at the NBA and some of these teams that could really use him, who would you have to be? You'd honestly have to be you'd have to be one of the best teams in the league, dude, to be able to absorb the criticism that you would get for signing this guy. Which is why I say I don't think anybody's going to sign him right now. I think he's probably out the rest of the year, and I think that he's going to have to wait till next season, till all this, blows over, as they say, which is really sad because I think that, I wish that in some of these situations, sometimes I wish there was an ability for these guys to issue an honest and stern apology and go about doing something to prove that they actually care about the mistake that they made. Because that's the real issue here.
Yes,
that's the image issue.
Yes, it is.
Do you actually care that you said that word, or are you just apologizing to save the skin off your back? Because his apology did not seem genuine to me. But maybe I'm just a hater. But I didn't like his apology.
You can't tell me you don't know what that word means.
Yeah.
Come on. Who are we kidding? I think they're going to go and make a move beyond Myers Leonard. Yeah. And I think it's probably going to restrict Rudy. I don't think anybody signs him. And again, when I look at the hierarchy in the Western Conference, I still maintain the Clippers are soft. I think the Lakers, I would take zero risk with Anthony Davis. I look at the Nuggets. I think Jokic and Murray are lethal. I think that is arguably, if AD's hurt, that's the best 1-2 in the Western Conference.
Yeah.
I think they're, with all due respect, I think they're superior to Donovan and Rudy. Because
do you think
of
it's
Rudy's
chemistry, or what do you think it is?
I think it's chemistry, and I think it's full skill set. I think that Jokic is a superior player to Rudy Gobert. And I'm not trying to be a know-it-all or a dick about this. I just don't think in the NBA at this point that a defensive player of the year at the 5 makes you a championship caliber team. I think when I look at who are the other defensive player of the year candidates on a regular basis? I look at Giannis. Giannis can defend 3 positions.
Yeah, you've got Giannis, you've got Anthony Davis, you've got Joel.
I don't know. I don't look at Joel as a defensive player of the year.
Well, this year he's in it. He's not there every year. Every single year guys are Giannis, Rudy, AD.
I think Giannis is the best defensive player in the NBA. I think Kawhi is right there.
Yeah.
But when you're a big that can defend the 3-point line and still get back to defend the rim, which Rudy has not shown the ability to do that on any level.
Yeah.
That's incredible. But then again, I look at the fact that Giannis can't shoot.
Right.
So what's the value in being the defensive player of the year if you can't shoot in this league? Well, it's starkly less.
Well, here's the thing, though. The value in Giannis is much higher than the value in Rudy because Giannis can dominate an entire game.
Yeah, because he runs and
he's got the athletic ability that Rudy does not have.
Yeah, he's a force. I look at some of the comments. Let's Talk Fortnite says hi. Well, hi. Good to see you, buddy. I look at Omar Holder. Says, let's see. I would agree because they thought they had it won and were a lock in the Western Conference Finals. We're talking about the Clippers, I think, here. Jazz, frankly, were overperforming in that series without Bogdanovic. Well, in the Nuggets series, that's very true. Mm-hmm. I mean, they win that series if they have Bogdanovic, though, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if you're pushing it to 7 games without one of your players, theoretically, you'd be able to win that series if Bogdanovic is out there shooting.
If they had a full complement of players last year, the Jazz win that series. But I think Jokic and Murray are on a different level right now than they were at any time last year.
And I think the other thing you got to consider too is Michael Porter Jr. is a lot better player than he was last year. Porter Jr. last year missed a ton of shots in that series, and those were essentially just turned into turnovers, and gave the Jazz extra possessions.
Sean is talking about the Clippers, and what I was talking about. Omar's a little late to the show. What I said about the Clippers is they're soft, and I want to see. They leave me wanting more
every time.
Like, I'm disappointed when I watch the Clippers.
Like that game where they go to Boston and lose, unacceptable.
How?
Unacceptable.
How? Right? And I think this idea that you can rotate Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, you got to stop doing that, because what's killing the Clippers is just a straight lack of chemistry. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have. You see it on the floor. Never mind that old saggy balls. And Steve Ballmer is sitting there waving his dick in our face the entire game. That was probably a bit much. Sorry.
Pumped.
Yeah, sorry. Never mind that he's doing crotch showings on the sideline.
I say I'm just fired up to be here today.
I don't need to see your way too tight pants, man. Anyway, the point is, I think they have awful chemistry.
Yeah.
And I think it's awesome that Pat Beverly is a defensive guy. It's awesome that they can beat teams like the Jazz. I don't know that they beat the Jazz in a 7-game series.
Yeah, I think it's. I think it'd be. I honestly, I don't know. I can't on one hand say, well, I don't think the Clippers would beat the Jazz in a 7-game series, but then I also can't say on the other hand that I'm confident, that I'm 100% without a doubt confident that the Jazz could win that series either, because I think that what we see out of the Jazz, unfortunately, is that though in the regular season, what have they done so far? They've dominated the first half. But what we've seen is that about every, I would say, 5 to 6 games, they have a game where in the first 3 quarters of the game, they really, really, really struggle to shoot the ball. And then they end up having to play really good defense in the fourth, and they end up getting that team to turn the ball over. And that's one thing I don't think the Clippers would give you. I don't think they're going to – I know for a fact they're disciplined enough not to turn it over constantly. Their issue is shot selection late in games. They settle for crap shots that are really difficult, and they won't go to the paint. And so that's why I say, yes, they're soft, but I don't believe that the Jazz are just, lock and key going to beat them. I can't say that.
Well, and the reason that is because Rudy winds up guarding Pat Bev in the corner.
Yeah.
And you wind up in situations where the Jazz can't handle smaller size and higher pace.
Which is why we went ahead and signed Ilyasova.
And I think he really helps you reduce Rudy's minutes.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to find a body who can rebound and who can shoot. Because Joel Embiid, and I know this is going to piss Jazz fans off because they lost their mind on YouTube last time we talked about this. Joel Embiid exposed Rudy Gobert.
I didn't sleep for the past 2 nights because of this. I was that upset.
We get it. We get it. I think Rudy got exposed a little bit.
Yeah. Not a little bit, a lot of bit.
He struggles to defend the perimeter.
Yeah.
Because when he's not in the paint, they don't have a big body who can do that.
But the thing in that game that was crazy to me is that even when he was in the paint, I mean, Joel just moved him. Like, Joel just, literally said, hey, get out of my way, I'm coming. And that was the thing that I think was so frustrating for Jazz fans. I mean, I think, yes, the officiating conversation in that game, sure, but I'm putting that aside. I'm talking about when Joel and Rudy are one-on-one, and Joel's coming down the paint and just moves Rudy, frankly, just set his ass down. I mean, he just knocked him over, put him on his back, and essentially just dunked the basketball. And it goes to show you that investing all that money in Rudy Gobert to then go up and give up 40 and 20, I think. It was like 40 and 19 to Joel Embiid is just not, what are we doing, bro?
Well, and Barry makes an excellent point. This is why the Knicks are so heavily dependent on Julius Randle.
Yeah.
Because Randle can play inside and out. and it opens up the paint for their guards to get to the basket, and it's why guys like Toppin are always going to be role players.
Well, and you look at Anthony Davis and what his role is on the Lakers and why they miss him so much. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, his ability. He hit. Don't forget what he did in the bubble. He hit game winner after game winner in the bubble on the perimeter.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what it is.
Well, so real quick on the NBA, because now we're 32 minutes into Ersan Ilyasova, you stud. Real quick on the NBA, what do you expect in the second half? Because I think there is some interesting conversations to be had around, what this league looks like in April and May instead of February and March. Mm-hmm. And when I look at, the names that we've talked about, my biggest question is, who's got the groinial region to hang when it gets into crunch time?
Mm-hmm.
And, I never thought I would say this, but I look at the Nuggets a little differently. I was looking at how Jokic is impacting games last night, like I was watching highlights.
Dude.
And I was reading, scopes on their games. He's impacting the game off the ball just as much as he is by shooting and finishing.
Yeah.
And it's really impressive. But they need to show me they can be a championship caliber team in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
The Clippers need to show that they can be a championship caliber team. We know who the Lakers are. I don't know that there's a proven number 2 in the Western Conference. That's why the Phoenix Suns are so fascinating to me.
I don't know that there's a right now, because of AD's injury and where that leaves the Lakers in reality, there is not, to me, a proven number 1 team right now. Yes, the Jazz have the best record, but that doesn't mean anything once you get to the postseason. Nobody gives a damn if you win 70-10 in the regular season and you lose in the first round of the postseason. Great. Nice regular season. Who gives a damn? So I don't know that there is a clear-cut number 1 best team right now headed into the postseason. Yes, the Jazz are right there in that conversation, but we can't honestly say that the Jazz are prepared to go ahead and beat the Clippers in a 7-game series. We can't say that yet. So what I want to see is, and this applies to the entire league, frankly, I want to see the teams that we know are going to be postseason players. So I want to see the Nets, I want to see the Sixers, the Jazz, the Clippers, the Lakers, the Suns, any of those teams. I want to see them take the season, grab it by the horns, and get themselves ready for the postseason. I want to see Kevin Durant get his ass off the bench, get in the game, get the chemistry right, and turn that team into a championship caliber team. Because right now, they have chemistry issues just the same way the Clippers have chemistry issues. All 3 of those guys have not played together, and when you get into a postseason game, that's going to be an issue. Teams will figure out how to exploit that.
By the way, don't sleep on the Dallas Mavericks. They're in the A spot.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that Porzingis is playing right now,
again, chemistry.
I would tell you, don't sleep on them, especially if they trade him and upgrade. I mean, when is Kristaps Porzingis going to have more trade value than he's got right now?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think if you're Dallas, it's a really difficult decision to make because he's finally coming around. He's finally done being injured.
He's finally healthy.
He's finally here. He's finally doing what you paid him to do.
He's got his legs under him. He's running the floor.
So as much as I totally understand and agree with the logic about trading him, I just don't think that they're going to, because if you trade him, number one, it's going to be hard to upgrade from him. I mean, he's a really skilled guy when he's on the floor, so I don't know. Like, think about it. Guys at his size who play the 5, who can shoot it at the rate he shoots it, are really difficult to come by.
But you can find 5s.
Not like him. I don't think like him, man.
But I don't know that he plays a physical 5.
He doesn't.
I think who's the best available player in the NBA trade cycle right now? It's got to be Bradley Beal.
Yeah.
If you want to take Porzingis and give me Bradley Beal, I'll do that.
Yeah.
If you want to give me Porzingis and a ton of draft picks, I'll do that. I think there are deals out there for Porzingis. I just don't know. I don't know that a championship caliber team can have him as their starting 5.
He hasn't proven that yet. Certainly, that needs to be proven.
Yeah, and I know that may be crazy talk, but I all I'm saying is the way they're playing right now, I would not sleep on them in a short series.
Yeah,
they can be scary.
Yeah,
because Luka makes crazy shots. Porzingis is hitting that logo 3. Mm-hmm. We've seen that. They have nice role players who can contribute.
Yep.
I look at some of the. I look at what are your Warriors right now? a 500 team that's a half game out. Steph
Yeah.
is balling, but I mean, he
Well,
doesn't have a whole lot of help right now.
The crazy thing with the West is like you can be the 10th seed and be 2 games out of the 5th seed. I mean, that's what we see every single year out of the West. I mean, it's essentially the top 3 teams and everybody else. You know, the top 3 teams typically will separate themselves by like 5 or 6 games. And then essentially from the 4 seed, literally some years all the way down to like the 11 seed are separated by less than 5 games, which is not a lot in the league. I mean, you're talking about one road trip. You could go from being the 4th seed to the 8th seed. I mean, that's how crazy this conference is. And so, you know, again, when I look at the bottom of the Western Conference, not that the Suns are at the bottom anymore, but, you know, when you look at teams like that who historically have not been very good but are now getting better, Western Conference is deeper than it's ever been. So a team like the Warriors, their expectations are not to go and win a championship, obviously, with all the injuries, all the things they're dealing with. But I think Steph would like to be able to say, hey, in a down year, we made the postseason. I think for their young guys, for guys like Wiseman, you know, guys like Oubre, who, you know, are nice little players, it'd be great for them to get some postseason experience. And I think Steph wants to. So it's great to see an engaged Steph Curry, I got to say. Like being able to see him play on his own and essentially have the opportunity that guys like James Harden had in Houston is really cool. He's putting up huge numbers.
The guy that's really interesting on the trade market, by the way, is Lonzo Ball.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was almost a done deal that they were going to trade him. New Orleans was going to trade him.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden he's played so well the last 2.5 weeks that there's a lot of talk saying that they're not going to move him now.
Right.
But just about everybody out west wanted him. You know, you know, like looking at the situation in the Eastern Conference, Milwaukee absolutely was said to be interested in him. Like, there were a lot of people out there chasing Lonzo Ball.
Yeah.
If you're New Orleans, do you keep that group together? Or is Josh Hart ready to start?
Well, I think that the conversation really hinges on Zion Williamson. I think Zion Williamson has come along. Does he have a good jump shot yet? No, he doesn't. But is he figuring out how to, as James Gordon would say in The Dark Knight, do the best he can with what he has, right? That's what he's doing. So he understands now that, hey, I'm not going to just stand on the three-point line and wait for the ball to drive. What I need to do is I need to play from the inside out. So I need to be a force on the block, but then I need to come out to the elbow or just inside the 3, get the ball, and then make my move. And he's physical enough, he's strong enough to get what he wants. And frankly, as Rudy Gobert found out, he's going to out-rebound you too because his vertical is so damn good. So he's playing well right now, you know? So if I'm them, like, the trade market for Lonzo is going to be here next year. There's no doubt about it. So I might consider keeping these guys together this year and seeing what they could do together. Because, hey, by the way, they're all really young, and they could be a future core. They could be a good team together.
How much value do you put into Kevin Love? Because he's a guy that's got, $60 million left on his deal over the next 2 years.
He is good at making money, bro.
He is really good at making money. But what is he? He's a guy that can defend the 5 and shoot the 3.
Yeah.
And I think that's why there was so much talk about a Porzingis-Kevin Love swap.
Mm-hmm.
Kristaps has $100 million left, right? So I think that's a really interesting guy. I don't know what you do if you're Cleveland. Who are you? Like, are you a contender for a playoff spot, or are you going to trade Nance and Kevin Love?
I just think that right now I don't know why you wouldn't trade, because this team is not good enough to win a championship. And again, maybe people disagree with me on this, but I just don't think there's any sense in keeping a mediocre team together who's not going to win a championship, which you can apply that same logic to a team like New Orleans or Cleveland or whatever.
But then what do you say about the Warriors trying to get Victor Oladipo?
Well, that's a difference-making player. I mean, then now you have a backcourt you can play with.
Well, I mean, very clearly, Oladipo's a great fit in San Francisco, Golden State now. Mm-hmm. They've got to find a way to score when Steph isn't playing.
Well, that's why you would sign Oladipo, because then what you can do is you can have Oladipo, Steph, and Kelly Oubre playing 1 through 3, and then you've got Wiseman at the 5 and Draymond at the 4. And now all of a sudden, if you can put that team together a little bit, you got something you can play with.
I don't know. If I'm Golden State, am I going in on a wing? the caliber of I mean, they were linked to Bradley Beal, but that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And by the way, Washington hasn't said word one that they're going to trade him.
Yeah, I think Victor
Right.
Oladipo makes perfect sense. He needs a home. He doesn't want to be in Houston, and he needs a fresh start. And I think that Victor Oladipo needs to
balling
play
at a
with
high
guys.
level, man.
But he needs to play with guys who he believes in. And you can believe in Steph Curry. You can believe in Klay Thompson. He needs to play with guys who are legit.
But what do you do when all three of them are healthy? You know, like you would. Well, if Klay ever plays again without breaking a bone.
But this is what we said about Steph, Klay, and Kevin Durant. Well, what are they going to do? Well, they figured it out. I mean, I think that.
Yeah, but those are two. Klay Thompson and Victor Oladipo are two similar players in that both of them, when they go to the basket, are elite. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, obviously, Klay's arguably the best shooter in the NBA when he's healthy.
Yeah.
Right? Victor's not that guy.
Right.
But I think it makes sense that you could figure out how to play the three of them with James Wiseman.
Yeah.
It almost doesn't matter who your fourth is, but
Yeah.
guess what? Who do you have as who's good old number 22 for the Golden State Warriors is Andrew Wiggins. Mm-hmm. And you also have, you know, a dumbass Draymond still there. Like, I mean, there are some guys that you're going to have to say goodbye to. And
I would say goodbye to Andrew Wiggins for Victor Oladipo. I would. Andrew Wiggins hasn't really been a difference maker for them. He's been an average player for them, and Victor Oladipo has shown both before injury and after injury that he's legit, that he can score.
Deep or Zach LaVine?
Right now probably Zach LaVine. Yeah, probably Zach LaVine.
If you're the Bulls, why are you trading Zach LaVine?
You're dumb. I mean, you
I'd
should
love
be
to
building
understand
around him.
And if you're the Bulls, furthermore, if you're the Warriors and you can get the Bulls to take Kelly Oubre Jr.'s deal, because it is expiring, by the
Bro,
way.
if you could turn Kelly Oubre into Zach LaVine and get Victor Oladipo, okay, now we got a team.
I think if you, and it'll be interesting to see, if you're the Chicago Bulls, that to me is the only deal you make, because you're also going to get probably an unprotected pick out of that, right? So I would think that that's really the only deal that's going to be that appealing to you, is to go and get a guy like Zach LaVine, but you're going to have to give up Kelly Oubre's salary slot, which, by the way, I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah,
because his
it's an
deal's
upgrade.
expiring.
It's an upgrade. Like, why would you
But
not?
it is, but because it gives you fuck, man, the Warriors have spent so much money to be able to get an open salary slot from a significant player, like Kelly Oubre Jr. This offseason would be amazing.
Be huge.
Or you can have Zach LaVine.
I'll take Zach.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think he's one of the most underappreciated players in the NBA.
Well, he's coming along. He's developing. He's taking it seriously.
Yeah. I don't know. I think if you are any of the top teams in the West, like PJ Tucker's another interesting guy. Mm-hmm. PJ Tucker can defend the three. PJ Tucker or defend the five and shoot the three. There's a lot of value for that.
Yep.
There's a lot of value for if you're Milwaukee and you can get PJ Tucker, frees up Giannis quite a bit.
Yep.
Gives you a knockdown shooter in the corner. Like, there's a lot of talent available in the NBA right now.
Yeah. It's just a matter of who's going to go get it.
It'll be interesting.
As usual, who's going to spend the money?
All right, make sure you hit subscribe on the old YouTube machine there, and go ahead and press thumbs up as well. We really appreciate that. It helps the channel grow.